Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Rudy Page, and welcome once again. This is World Sickle Cell Day, and I'm really pleased that we've got with us Patrick OJEER, and he's what we call a service improvement consultant for sickle cell patients. So this is going to be a great dialogue because we'll be talking and thinking, sharing and learning from the patient's perspective, but also from the advocates, the role of the advocate, and how our community get involved in the system here in the UK. So, Patrick, welcome.
Thank you very much, Rudy.
Long time no see.
It's been a long time.
I can tell you the last time. It was Wood Green Futures.
Yeah, okay.
Up in North London.
Okay.
June 2019.
Really, it seems like yesterday because time goes so very, very quickly.
Yeah, so I think we've lost a few months since then, haven't we?
We have indeed. But I mean, even the first time I met you must be about 2010, 2011.
Yeah. So it would have been about 2011. Yes, that's when I was the chair facilitator for Healthcare for London's Patient and Public Advisory Group.
Wow.
And then you came and did a presentation with a colleague.
Yes,
if I remember rightly.
Because I was the chair of London Specialised Commissioning PPI group at the time.
Exactly. Okay. And we're going to talk a bit more about patient and public involvement in the system as we go through. So yes, that's a good 10 years ago since we met, really.
Yes, good 10 years.
Yes.
Somehow since then, we seem always to sort of pass each other, but we're always very strongly connected because of our sort of mutual interest in what we do.
Yeah,
advocacy in some part from the user or patient perspectives.
Absolutely, it's so important.
I mean, it's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I hope we could have a really good dialogue.
Thanks for that. So my starting point is for you. Just tell us a bit about yourself, Patrick.
Well, I'm a father. I'm a father with a son, my eldest son. I've got other children, but my eldest son was born with sickle cell anemia. A disease I knew very, very little about when he was born. Mm-hmm. However, I must say, I've always been and I believe that the NHS was there for everyone.
Yeah.
And I thought the NHS will actually do wonders as we grow up to believe. Whatever the disease, whatever the problem, they will do wonders. And I was quite shocked, actually, with my first contact with healthcare system with my son, because at the time I was an engineer working after really worked very hard to get where I really, really wanted. I was very happy because I was an engineer working overseas. I did a couple of tours in the Middle East. And so life to me was hard work, but it was rewarding and it was good. Okay. And then my son was born and I really had the time to look after him. So I became his main carer.
Okay. Yes, and we'll go a bit deeper to that. And you make a good point in terms of the access to services, because the NHS Constitution says, the first line says, the NHS belongs to all the people.
Absolutely.
Right. So tell us why this day is actually recognized as World Sickle Cell Day. And why was it started this particular 19th of June?
I mean, this is was a momentous sort of decision. This was made by the United Nations, the General Assembly, actually.
Okay.
In December 2008, they passed a resolution to recognize sickle cell disease as a public problem, because it's one of the world's foremost genetic disease. And they really make this on 2008, December. And the decision was from 2009 on the 19th of June. And every year after that, the 19th of June will be recognized as a World Sickle Cell Day to raise awareness both nationally and internationally. So therefore, it is a huge thing to achieve. And so therefore, it's recognized as such internationally, and we really got to grasp it. And we got to remember on Sickle Day. And you could do that in any way, either within yourself or family or friends, and also reach out and try to understand a bit more about sickle cell and the people with sickle cell disease, how much they really need support.
Yeah, and you raise a good point from a patient perspective, so we could spend a little bit time to think about that, because primarily we know sickle cell affects people of African descent. We understand thalassemia will affect people maybe of Mediterranean and other sort of backgrounds, but we're really focusing on sickle cell and people of African descent. So the challenge that we've had around awareness, but at the moment in 2021 going forward, a greater challenge seems to be not just in terms of blood donations, but of community understanding and what that means for our own community and what that means for sickle cell patients themselves. So what is your perspective around that community understanding and how some of those barriers, we can overcome some of those barriers?
You raised a great point at the beginning when you quoted the NHS constitution. However, in reality, it's not like that at all. And due to the fact that most of the population of sickle cell come from, I don't really classify it as Black or Afro countries or regions, but really truly it's from the malaria belt of the world, really, because there's a large amount of sickle cell patients in India, around the Mediterranean, all right, apart from the Caribbean and of course large areas of Africa, but it's there. And so therefore it really comes back to the constitution. So therefore we all should really have the same equal service throughout the NHS. However, on the other hand, from the NHS perspective, it's a disease that until relatively recently did have very little exposure and understanding of it.
Yeah, and certainly not the numbers as well.
Certainly not the numbers. Okay, so therefore, you know, it's about that. And fundamentally, when I speak, it's really about the NHS as being part of us. So we got to help to improve it as well.
Yeah.
So most of my work, I do believe that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, and there you go. And because overall society has its social and other problems between different groups, I mean, you can't ignore the fact of what happened in America recently with George Floyd. Okay, and then you saw the divisions in the group, and that is in all parts of our society, unfortunately. Some society more than others, and with sickle cell, which didn't come from not from Europe, but outside Europe, right, and general Central America, it falls in that same sort of category of what shall I say, disproportionate arrangements. So,
you know, so you have the disproportionate impact.
Absolutely.
So, but you don't get the level of service.
But you see,
to meet the needs. Yeah.
I you know, and really, and if you look further as well, not only there's kind of lack of really high class knowledge as they have with other disease like diabetes and hypertension and other areas. But most of our doctors in the Caribbean or Africa don't have much experience with sickle cell disease at all. They have more of the same because they were trained in this part of the world, and they're trained on those said diseases. Not to disregard those diseases at all. They're extremely important, but sickle cell also should be on the equal footing.
Right. So I think what you're highlighting there, Patrick, is one of the conundrums that we face, because in our community, we have a lot of African and Caribbean doctors and health professionals. So one of the challenges that we do have then, how do we translate that into service improvement? Because as we found out now during this particular pandemic era, we've had to say the workforce is the community and the community is the workforce.
Absolutely.
And our challenge going as we come through the pandemic is how we're going to get that collaboration from within our health professionals and the public, which is the community. However, as we both know, any of us can be on the public side. When we're not in our professional role, we are members of the public trying to access the same services. So the challenge we're facing now is how do we collaborate and improve the service and improve the system, given that we participate in the system as well?
Well, it's extremely difficult question to answer. Extremely difficult, because that word collaboration is such an important word. And in many ways, unfortunately, it's not being actually carried through. What the word, they use the word, but actually to see the actual collaboration that has taken place is far less than it ought to have been. And at the moment, as you said, being a patient, showing the patient perspective, I try to collaborate, and most things I've done is due to collaboration, but we still haven't really got that key to collaborate to the level we have with not a certain portion of clinicians and healthcare professionals, but all of the clinician health professionals. And when you got that collaboration working, you could see the benefits, and the benefit is just one: improvement in outcomes and improvement in experience and care.
No, absolutely. And as we know, the best outcomes is when, there's love, compassion, and people are treated with humanity.
Right, in a collaboration sort of environment. Right. So therefore, that at the moment we find, because it's something that I've been myself personally been battling, because I came from being a lay member to a patient representative to a patient leader. Right. And I find my home for a long time, and still are, as a patient leader, because these are people that actually achieve really a lot in as much of service provision, improved service provision from one way or the other in many parts of different diseases and areas. And there's a group of us actually, and I mean, if I mentioned, I was part of a cohort of a book relatively recently, published in 2020, called The Patient Revolution: How We Could Heal the Healthcare System. I mean, and it was a dozen other people. We get together from time to time, similar-minded people who have done enormous amount of good and improvements in the healthcare system, as individuals within their own sort of disease or services,
their own disciplines.
And really, I would, again, it just happened, I would really try to promote that book, because the book is, we don't get anything from it because it's published by a charity. And it's really good.
We would be happy to share that more widely as well.
Right, because and I really will take note, because it's a unique book, because all of us had our own individual chapters within that.
Of course.
But the introduction was done collaboratively, and the introduction is the key of what really going forward, and using a patient perspective as a really main tool.
Yes, and
to have improvements. It's not one size fits all at all. And so therefore I think it's a really important example.
That is the way forward as we move through the pandemic, and I think we'll see much more if we see some of the work that people like Dr. Donald Palmer has done, and there's others who really come together and been on many platforms to explain how best the public can be informed. So you mentioned that you had a son that has sickle cell anemia. So can you share some more information about the disorder and how it's impacted his life and your life?
Yeah, well, my son, sickle cell disease really is a hidden disability because it comes within the body, if I could say that. I'll give a very brief overview, right? It's an inherent condition. It's a condition that you actually gain from one gene from your mother and one gene from your father. It's not from one part of the family or the other, from both families. And those parents must have a sickle cell trait. Some know they have it, but most people don't know whether they got traits or not. But you inherit a gene from both sides of a family. The genetic change in the makeup is the makeup of the red blood cells. The red blood cells that really is the cause of change, if I could say that. Okay, it'll continue along the way, because you see the normal red blood cells live up to about 120 days. But those with sickle cell anemia, their red blood cells only last between 10 and 20 days, which causes a huge problem. The immune system of people with sickle cell is severely damaged. And that again makes it a bit complex because there's no two people with sickle cell that has the same or behave the same or react the same for all sorts of reasons. Even twins, you'd be surprised the difference how they're affected by the sickle cell disease. So there you go. Those with sickle cell, are open to catching all types of infections, and the crucial and really worrying thing about them, normally when they get infection normally travels so very fast within the system to create someone that's very, very, very seriously ill. Let me tell you an example. Many times my son will sneeze in the morning at say 8 o'clock, and he'd be in hospital with a severe pneumonia by 8 o'clock in the evening. Right? So it travels so very, very fast within the system. And that's one of the challenges when going and accessing healthcare, whether it's the crisis score by other means or if it's infection. If it's infection, to identify the infection as quickly as possible. And again, that most times I don't think it's easy to identify. So therefore you've got to use people like myself when my son is ill. Every time you have a crisis, it's a serious crisis as far as I'm concerned, until it shows it's not. Because there have been times, 2 or 3 times it's like that, really it escalates so very, very quickly that he almost end up in intensive care within a day. So you've got to be very, very careful. And that's where it comes, experience and knowledge of the disease in hospital settings is vital. And therefore you need clinicians and nurses who got a good degree of understanding of sickle cell disease.
Yeah, because you've got that challenge of professionals understanding, as well as you being able to communicate what's been going on. Absolutely. So that and you touched on it earlier on. So what were the additional motivations that sort of drove you to get involved as a patient and advocate?
Well,
patient and public advocate.
Well, the thing is, what really drove me is several things, not just one thing really. Initially, when I first sent my son, he got his first crisis at 2. And when I went to a local hospital in London, and in department, the doctors didn't know anything about sickle cell, nor did the nurses. And I couldn't really believe it. So it really what resulted in me, because we were sent down with 200 ml of Calpol, right? It really affected me badly. And what I did, I really kept my son at home and look after him. Every time he had a crisis, I attend to it. And he had a crisis roughly every month. But the crisis lasts between 5 and 7 days. And thereafter, I started reading and find out myself more about sickle cell disease. And of course, while he was doing that, I was still attending outpatient appointments with him. And we had several consultants, but one consultant, when he was about 5, she was very, very good. She seems to know so much about sickle cell. And she was a mature consultant. And she told me clearly that she was trained in America and she knew as much about sickle cell disease as anyone else to a certain extent. And that
she understood the symptoms.
Absolutely, absolutely. And really, it's amazing because what she did, in fact, she suggested I should take my son on a holiday when she found out it was from the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
She said, because the weather is such an important factor.
Of course.
It took some convincing, but eventually I took the challenge, and I was amazed with the results.
Yeah, it is, and we've seen over the years here, coming from obviously Caribbean community ourselves, the difference it is made to people's mental health, their spiritual well-being when they have been back out, and even their dietary habits as well.
Absolutely.
Blood pressure, diabetes.
Yeah. Well, but with sickle cell being in the warmth, right. I mean, he never had a crisis out there, but not only that, he was getting up and playing with his friends and the families, you know.
So he never had a crisis at all when he was in the Caribbean?
When he was there for months. I mean, not only did that, he just really was behaving much like a normal, not that he wasn't normal anyway, but more like normal. I didn't have to worry after a week or so. He was so comfortable. So that was improved. So when we got back again, I mean, when at that time, before we went to the Caribbean, I think he had 14 or 15 crises the previous year. Mm-hmm. When he came back, for the next 12 months, it was reduced, but it was cut in half.
Really? So do you think diet had anything to do with it?
Diet, of course, diet, and also doing the said things like he was drinking a little more fluids, right. He was resting, right? But, you know, and those 3 things, and again in Caribbean, being from the country, he was eating fresh vegetables and eating a lot of food, and, you know, make sure he ate well, okay? But he was drinking so much, so therefore he really had it was a great experience, and really I came back, and that consultant I became very, very close, as you can imagine, because she really she's one that it began to give me that sort of understanding about the disease.
So right? Once again, a friend of mine called Derek Clement, he says that we left the ingredients for our well-being home in the Caribbean, right? So you can see that from the sunshine in terms of the healing qualities as well. So, yeah, that is quite an
interesting statement. But I mean, and that was one that started me. And then, of course, I did more. And eventually, I joined a local support group. Mm-hmm. And I found there were so many people with this problem. And I really, you know, I took to that. And you know, I was involved with that. And I got to be a chair of that group. And as I could see, I was working towards helping other people and, you know, being part of the...
Yeah, so you had gone from just your own personal concern now to much more of a community and supporting
absolutely
others.
And then again, shortly after that, they formed the Northwest London Managed Clinical Network. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the manager of that was a wonderful lady called Mabel Ali. Mm-hmm. And I was asked as a chair of the support group to give a speech at that meeting, which I did. And on the strength of that, I was invited on that group, right? I was on the group for Northwest London clinical network for sickle cell and thalassemia. And Mabel and I clicked as well, very well. And she encouraged me to do all sorts of things, almost against my will. But she had such a wonderful way of doing.
You know what it is, because she understood the way the system is. If our community doesn't get involved,
absolutely,
because it's the involvement that translates into representation and having a voice, and that's still a challenge at our community, even though we've been here, you know,
absolutely,
since the Windrush. We're on 73 years of the Windrush generation, but the children of the Windrush generation have had enough access and understanding of how the system works to be much more involved in order to improve representation. So at least you exemplify that in terms of what you do, which is good.
Thank you very much. But I mean, she was even more than that, because she made herself available to me at any time I want to discuss about anything regarding the network or service. And she would, when she got interested in articles and things, she'll push it by me. But
willing to share again, willing to share.
Absolutely.
Willing to share.
Collaboration again. Yeah. And she was explaining to me and helped me to learn how to access the healthcare system. Yeah. Right, and that was really interesting, because all this happened because I was still busy looking after my son. I was still trying to get some work doing to pay the bills and everything else. But she made herself so well, and always there to explain things, always invite me along the way. I mean, she was so good. I mean, take for example, when around the same time the All Party Parliamentary was formed, the group was formed for sickle cell and thalassemia. When they invited her along as a network manager, she asked me to take her place, and she wrote back to the secretary and say that, and they said, no, there's only one place available for the network. She said, okay, fine, let Mr. OJEER take that. They was really gobsmacked, but sorry, she pushed me there, and I really did, and that was really, really, really good. I mean, because they were very, very useful in helping me to do other things further on. I didn't envisage at the time, but really was there to help me further on.
Well, so you got to where many of the decisions are made in terms of the policies.
Absolutely.
And then once you understand what the policies are, then you can then gauge whether the way they're being translated in terms of the services that we received, where the gaps might be. And this is a challenge that we're going to face over the next couple of years, even more so.
I didn't see it at the time because I was still really at the back of my mind, want to get back to real work. I spent 10 years trying to get to a position of working overseas as an engineer. Finally got there after 10 long, hard years, you know, and here I'm doing something. Okay, it's good, it's useful, but come on, you know, I want to go back to the real world, earn some real money, you know, and have a real independent life. But anyway, and then again, Mabel again kind of coerced me into joining London Specialised Commissioning Group. It took a good 3, 4, 5, 6 months to do that because I was dead against it at the beginning, right? Okay, I mean, I was at that time with other organizations, other groups and so forth. And I really, again, back my mind, when is this going to finish? When am I going to go back to good real life? But I think I transformed really from that thinking without conscious of it, because we're a London Specialised Group. That was really where the decision was being made by the Commission.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And when I got there, of course, the system was on commissioning of services. The service had to be on the national definition set to be commissioned. Any disease on the national definition set could be commissioned in a specialized forum. If you're not on the list, sorry, right? Sickle cell wasn't on that list. So, right, with the aid of...
And what year was that now, Patrick?
That was about 2008, 2009-ish.
Yeah, because obviously people have been campaigning for many years and probably had not understood.
Absolutely, they don't understand the system.
Wasn't on that.
Right, but they didn't understand the process.
Yeah.
How to get in there, and the criteria you need to get on there. Now, again, while I was Land Specialized Commission, I really, in collaborative as well with other colleagues with other diseases, I somehow managed them to do a update on that list and managed to get sickle cell on the list as a last disease.
Yeah, with the evidence, because it wouldn't get on there.
Right.
Without the evidence.
As a last disease, and it's really, I didn't think that was as important as it has been since, because there's not been a latest edition since then, since that time.
So you realize you're an unsung hero within the system.
I really can't take that because there's so much to do.
I know there's a lot around, and it's one of the challenges that we have, even across our own community, that word recognition.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
But dealing with the process is not highlighted so much, because it's all detailed. It's going to lots of meetings.
Right. Exactly.
But you know, I go back to my point about involvement translates into representation.
I mean, you're talking into nitty-gritty of things. I didn't want to go to that sort of detail, but I was a avid cricketer, and I really love cricket. And I really, to me, my second home, I always been at Lord's. The third home is at the Oval. And at a drop of a hat, I would go and watch a game of cricket. And after, during my playing days, I knew a lot of people who did well and played for England. So I was always had it available for invitation from one of my friends to watch a game of cricket. I did the Oval Lords. But during that time, I didn't have time to watch cricket. I remember, because as you said, it's so important to be at every meeting. I remember one time we had a meeting in the morning, and I had a VIP ticket to go to Lord's and Test match. And I rushed into the Lord's just to have lunch. I went, of course, there was a table before me, Lord's. I mean, I got lunch, and I had to leave again for the next meeting without seeing the ball bowled. You know, that happened to me on so many times, where I would miss all morning and afternoon. I managed to get the evening, last 2 hours, or tea or something like that. I'll go for tea, and I have to go to the meeting without seeing the ball being bowled. So you're right in saying that. I mean, and you tend to forget those little details.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But you're right.
Yeah, it's about commitment and dedication.
It's a commitment. And I was glad that they finally got recognized and being the last disease about there. And I think they now kind of hit the head once, though, because I knew Dame Sally Davis from Central Middlesex Hospital. She was a consultant in sickle cell. But we used to meet in meetings or something along the way, when at the beginning with Mabel Ali and so forth. But I never knew her that well until after the specialized. I got sickle cell on the specialized forum. And about 2 years after, because she commissioned a report, DHO, the commission report for specialized, how to commission specialized sickle cell and thalassemia. And on the day before the launch, I met her at an event, and we have a chat. And she said, "Patrick, what have you done?" I was a bit strange having a discussion. She said, "Well, I was looking for you for 2 years." Because then she recognized that I was the one who done the job. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that she was very proud.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. So from then on, things start moving in the sickle cell world, as a level. And of course, the next big change, which you were part of as well, is the Health and Social Care Bill.
Yes.
2012/13.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that again was such an important thing, simply in specialized services.
Yeah.
Simply because I don't think people are aware that before the last bill, sickle cell service was commissioned on 12 local areas throughout England. Each had their own sort of structure, old governance to commission any disease from the national definition set. Not many did more than about a dozen from those 34 diseases, but they all did it throughout England. Most of the disease was covered one way or the other. Right now, sickle cell being a new disease, there wasn't deemed to be commissioned. So although it's on the list, it wasn't deemed to commission until the white paper came for the Health and Social Care Bill, which scrapped that old system, and in place they put that specialized diseases now it's going to be commissioned throughout England at one level, right?
So it wasn't down to that local decision, the local
and all 34 diseases, which created 74 clinical reference groups, because some diseases are split.
Yeah. Right.
Which all the 34 diseases would be commissioned at one level on a national, sort of good service delivery. So therefore I had to make sure that, as far as I'm concerned, do my best to ensure that sickle cell was then commissioned at a very high standard, the highest possible nationally. And so again, when NHS England came with a clinical reference group, the clinical reference group really was a group that was responsible for specialized services. However, and when the beginning, really, it was created as a really assurance group, because they thought most of the policies was in place. When they found that a lot of policies wasn't there and there was none for sickle cell, it became something else.
Yeah, and hence that impacts on service provision,
absolutely,
service quality, staff training, all kinds of
all that. Research,
and particularly research as well.
Research, and to encourage research. But
people being able to raise funds for research as well.
But it was also, I mean, the ethos, don't forget, the ethos was on the bill was no decision about me without me.
Without me, yeah.
So therefore, again, the people like myself had a greater role, so to speak, right? And that was important in the CRG. So therefore, we could try and shape what policies was really.
And you raise a good point with that, because if we take London in terms of the public and patient voice, and then the London Clinical Senate itself, the patient voice was really taken into consideration in a very serious way. So they really did have a voice.
Yes, they did have a voice. And that was important, as you know. But again, is how you work in that collaboration again. Because in reality, the CRG is very clinician sort of heavy. So it's very hard. And really, again, you got to use all your skills and your ability.
No, absolutely. I mean, we say clinically led, system enabled, but you have to ensure that the patient and public voice is part of the system.
Absolutely. And that is a very, very tricky thing to try to achieve.
Yeah, there's some sensitive grounds to walk on.
Very much so.
Trust me, I know.
Right. So that was, again, that was very, very interesting. But then again, I was growing in confidence during that time. Yeah. Because quietly, I mean, I wasn't the first. I mean, it's the first time I'm having this sort of discussion in a public domain, right? The very first time, because I'm sort of, I like to be under their radar, because, a few times that I surfaced myself, I found I got more enemies than friends.
It can be challenging when you're making decisions, because one of the key things when you're within the system and you're focused on reducing inequalities, then you have to have the courage of your convictions if you're going to stay in that arena. And of course, the challenge is from people of all backgrounds and status as well, as you know.
Right.
But you do the right thing because it's right for the patient and public, because they need, because they're vulnerable.
Absolutely. But then again, as you know, when you come across these hardened professionals, which are professional sort of, NHS management boards, you know how challenging that could be. Yeah. Okay. They are seasoned, boards with so much experience of the system more than you have.
Yeah.
So you really have to be extremely, what shall I say now?
Yeah. Careful, but however,
absolutely.
However, when it comes to serving, when it comes to quality, as we always remind our colleagues, it's that the system, the first goal is high quality care,
yeah,
regardless of who you
regardless,
are,
absolutely.
where you are in the system.
Yeah, but the thing is, as you're right in saying that, but then again, is that the evidence, you've got to have strong enough evidence, right?
Absolutely.
And that is it. That is the key to get that evidence and make sure it's strong, but also have some sort of someone that really will be, you know, on your side, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's why the advocate, and you're right, because the personal story is really important, personal stories. But again, the need to have advocacy within the system, but it still comes back to the community being able to, capable of collaborating with itself and to put their voice forward as a group.
But also, I agree, but also another element as well, and that I really, really took on board in London Specialised Commission, because being a chair, I was invited to the main board meeting once a month, and really is the prioritisation of funds, prioritisation of importance of services, you know. But you know, I was fairly successful, only successful issues, two other issues as well, because really at the end, I've always tried to highlight best I can. It's not always about money, but you know, but quality of life and length of life, you know. So I've always managed using that very, very carefully and sparsely as I possibly can. But when I use it, it's always been very, very successful in getting things, what I've done, what I important to do.
And actually, you make a good point there, Patrick, because sometimes when you're looking at quality and service improvement, it's about staff voices being heard with their ideas. So it's not about money, it's being able to do things differently. But of course, there has to be an environment where staff with the good ideas are given the opportunity to, you know, translate those ideas into very practical ways of improving services. So yes, it's not always about money. So let me go on. So has the NHS system changed much in the last few years that you've been supporting your son?
I would say that, yes. I mean, it's fundamentally changed since after being on the specialised platform.
Particularly from that time, then you can.
Because from that time, I mean, don't forget how the system works. You know the system, but many people don't. If you don't have been in a position to make policies, you know, especially with specialized diseases, you've got to rely on IFRs, that's individual funding request form, you know, and you know how difficult that is, because each patient, you have to fill a form for each drug, for each patient, and it's only for a certain time, and that could go through a process, and it could take a time, and then it's only for a short amount of time, and you got to, if you want to continue, got to do it all over again. So with having where you could make policies that give you that freedom, you know, freedom, and from then on, take for example, policy of red cell exchange has been so much better for patients. You got policy of hydroxycarbamide, which, you know, which again, because it works on some patients, doesn't work on others. At least you get an opportunity to use in the best possible way to try and get, you know, better quality of life for some patients who are desperate in need. You know, you know, so therefore it's really helped to change in the last, since being on a specialized platform, you know, quite fundamentally. I mean, you take these things, the changes after a while for granted. I mean, another area which I think the policy which I find particularly pleased with is the combination policy for inoculation, you know, because of the complexity of sickle cell and thalassemia. You know, I mean, you might have one agent 1 year and you might not be as good next year or two, or whatever it is, you know. So it's to have that combination policy. I think that's been very, very useful for patient. And so there's many others.
Okay. So having said that, then as we go through the pandemic, what improvement do you think can still be made now for sickle cell patients in the future? You know, let's look at the next 5 years, because we know there's never any great leaps. But if we were to look, you know, ahead for the next 5 years, what do you think the improvements could be and should be for sickle cell patients?
Well, you know, it could be enormous. It could be. I can't dictate, because things change so much and everybody have their own priorities. However, I don't think that much change will happen without collaboration. Collaboration, I think, is the key to making improvement, because I think the patient, although got a voice, the voice is not strong enough to collaborate on a meaningful manner with clinicians and commissioners. Okay, and if you could have that, I think it's
so
unlimited.
As you say that, then, so if we look at it from the patient and public voice, and obviously when we talk about the public, we're talking about families. So yes, there are patients, but there's families, there's friends and families.
Yeah.
So what would you say would be the priority areas for the community to begin to collaborate within itself, initially reaching a consensus, and then the advocates, the clinicians from the community, then and those interested, because by experience, then advocating to the system? So where would the patients and public start? That very basic involvement is the challenge. So,
well, fine, but you see, we got these support groups, which ought to be more. Support groups really got to be a bit more involved, right? I mean, we need that collaborative thinking within support groups, and of course, I do believe all support groups should have a very strong link with the Sickle Cell Society.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is the main body, isn't it?
Which is a main
society.
It's a main body.
In Harlesden.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the Sickle Cell Society now is stronger than it's ever been. Right. But although it's as stronger than it's ever been, it's still really, really limited.
Yeah, it's relative to the size of the system.
Exactly. You understand it? It really it hasn't got the capacity by a long way to do issues that really important, and they know it's important.
And so it's about strengthening the voice then.
It's strengthening the voice, and whilst trying to gradually strengthen the society.
Yes.
Right. I do believe so. I mean, Sickle Cell Society now is really been at the forefront of trying to get using Ivan Smith, who died recently in North Middlesex Hospital. They're involved with it. I think it's a good thing, and they should do more and more of that. All right. Not only him, because it's unfortunate his parents had to take a private sort of thing to get coroners. The hospital really didn't want that, didn't invite that. So maybe they could help others with instances of severity like that hospital do exactly what Smith's parents did, to bring it to the public, open to the public. And when I think about it, it's so really, really sad what happened to Ivan Smith. It's so sad, because, and that is how the complexity, which you know, of the NHS runs. 25 years ago, I was advised when I was taking my son and looking after himself by someone in your family who had 2 daughters living in that area. Now, they said to me, look, my 2 daughters don't get your problem what you're talking about, which are experiences in West London, because we had a fast track system in A&E, right? To get service quickly when they got crises. I was right. And also, they had when I investigated further, they had a George Mars Center, which was at the time state-of-the-art community center for sickle cell patients, and they could promote sort of have all sorts of events there, you know, and all sorts of they had a big conference room with a drop-down screen and 3 or 4 other smaller rooms, and unfortunately, when it wasn't used as well as for whatever reason. So when you think back, it was such a great service 25 years ago.
Yeah. So what you're saying as well, that provision had been put in place, but there wasn't the uptake.
Well, it was not. It was the uptake at one time, but some of that slipped. And I think I really do believe that if the patient voice, because it's not only that, if the patient voice throughout the care was really alive and felt forceful, they could see those changes happen before it happened, like what happened to Ian Smith. You understand? Because, as you know, funding arrangement changes, CEO changing in trust, and department is change and reconfiguration.
Priorities change.
Absolutely.
People
so
move on.
These are just a small complexity of the service. But if you got a very strong patient voice, they will highlight these things to like the society and other big groups who will try to prevent any adverse services. Right?
Okay, that's so I'm going to end on a positive note for you, because yes, there are challenges. So again, when you look down the road and you look back, and then you look back. Sorry, when you're down the road and you look back. What will really be your proudest moment?
Well, the proudest moment by a long way has been getting Sickle on the a specialized platform. But also I've been very, very strong going forward from, because at the moment we've got these now networks, specialized networks, 10 networks, trying to create the same level. Now, because of West London network, I saw where it could improve. And I wrote a report which was taken up by the director of the network. And actually, because he invited me to have to have a chat with my experience and knowledge, how he feel the network could really be as good as it can. So I really, instead of a chat with him, I just sent him a report. And he was so pleased that he actually invited me to be part of the bid for that network, right? And what it was is to have a completely separate PPV, or patient voice, separate but well supported. Okay. And
again, it's still integrated within the system.
Absolutely.
But it's specialized enough to really understand the priorities.
Absolutely.
Of the sickle cell,
absolutely, and then have a very strong independent voice that we could cascade to the NDT and steering group issues that concern the patient without any sort of Rotary report or any involvement at all. And I think because of COVID, only is the foundation set and the building's taking shape. Because of COVID, it hasn't really performed
but
to see the results just yet.
But it will, and we look forward to the launch, relaunch.
Relaunch. But I think I'm looking forward to that, because this is the only out of 10 networks. This is the only network that have this on the structure.
So I hope you share that more with us so that we can get the community involved.
I hope to find when we start really producing stuff, because another thing is people not really aware how slow the the wheel of the NHS works, right? But once you start getting results, then you're there. But that's what I've got to look forward to at the moment, which I'm really trying to
get. So thank you very much, and it's been very insightful and very rewarding for the community and those who are also interested in improving the services for sickle cell patients on World Sickle Cell Day. So thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I must share with you before I go, I don't know what it was by design or what, but I'm very happy to share, because today is also my actual birthday.
Many happy returns. Take care. See you again soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.